Here we go.
So Regenesis is the process of midwifing and rebirthing the human condition on all levels. If we take a moment to consider the concept that it invokes an image of letting go of all that doesn't work personally, socially, and globally, and allowing that to be compost for an innovative approach to build, design, and architect the future that we truly want. We must focus on every aspect of the life experience, from spirituality to art and culture, the environment and stewardship of it, health and wellness of spirit, mind, and body, the idea of alternative economic and governance models, green and renewable energy, appropriate science and technology, independent media and communications, and peace and justice. And welcome to another episode of Regenesis. You there? Can you hear me?
Me? Or are you
Yes,
talking to the
sir.
audience?
all of us.
Yeah, I can certainly hear you and see you. It's great to see you, Michael. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So welcome, David Thomas Scott, to another episode of Regenesis, or as some people Freudian slip and say Regenesis. And this is a show where we like to have different people come on and talk about their unique perspective of their own sovereign connection to the world, the universe, and really a lot of it sometimes focuses on the time that we're in. Of course, we're in a great transitional moment here on the planet through many things, through economics, spirituality, politics, or maybe we're not. And that's what we're here to explore. So again, I want to welcome you, and you are the founder and spearhead of the Influencer Engine. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day level, and we'll go from there.
My business is Steam Engine Publishing. We make made-for-you books for thought leaders. Everything from business books to motivational to inspirational, management, fiction. I think the common denominator is people who are looking to engage in the world and having a stake in the conversation, but don't quite know how. I mean, maybe they don't have the time to write a book. So my most recent book's called The Influencer Machine. This is how to extend your 15 minutes of fame to a lifetime of thought leadership. And that's the vision that we're trying to bring. It's not just about a book. This is an inert pile of ones and zeros sitting in the back eddies of 2 million other books on Amazon published every year. The point is to get that out in front of the right eyeballs so that you can help move the needle. And it's not necessarily just about ego. It's about engaging in the conversation, leaving a legacy, participating in the dialogue. And that's why I appreciate what you do. You and I are friends outside of here, and I've followed, watched from afar the things that you're developing, and I really appreciate it. And I think that's exemplified by the intro that you played for us. And that's why I was happy to come speak with you, because for me, it's not just about publishing books. That happens to be the medium. That's the widget I'm trafficking in, but it's that's just what happens in 3D. What's going on in the 5D and 10D and beyond realms is what I think you and I and so many people are participating in right now. And that's what has always fired me. That's what has always moved my blood from the very beginning. And that's what I've been fighting for as a creative person, as a filmmaker, musician, writer, but as a spiritual person as well. What are you fighting for? You're fighting for something real. Don't give me this puppet show going around trying to triangulate against other people to try to learn how to behave. Just, follow a bunch of lemmings. You talked about sovereignty. Let's find out how to be free. That's what I care about. I want people to be free. And the way to do that is to disengage from the levels of attachment, fear and dread and predation and power that you kind of touched on earlier. Give people a vehicle to be able to do that in the right timing. I don't have to be an evangelist. I don't have to talk anybody in anything. I don't have to bring them into any program. But if they're ready to step into autonomy, independence, have a clarity of vision, and participate in something bigger than just watching a Kardashians rerun and, punching in and out on your 9-to-5 job, I'm here to help with that. That's kind of my vision.
Well, and I think it's such an interesting thing that you touched on, because when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And of course, you and I both have the privilege of living in Crestone, which is a place that gives us a lot of space and time and breath to be able to focus on our own evolutionary work. But at the same time, through your publishing, through the work that I do with Earthstock Foundation, still being able to be of service and have positive impact or influence or addition to or supplement to the world as a whole. But talking about when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. I know you and I have shared a lot of discourse about our spiritual experiences and how that kind of helped to forge or formulate. I don't want to say who we are, because there's the identity and the egos of who we are. Here's David and Michael, and we're talking on Zoom. But these other elements. Can you share a little bit about your story of what helped to cultivate and germinate you to be where you are today? And I know you have some fascinating stories.
Gosh, it's so multidimensional, because you can talk about the people who influenced you in your life, in your career, influenced you creatively, inspired you. When I had dropped out of college for 3 years. I had the luxury and the blessing to meet an acupuncturist called Scott Boynton, Westerner like us, MS diagnosis he had. The doctors didn't give him a super nice prognosis. They said, "You're pretty much stuck in this, buddy. Get used to it." But he got acupuncture himself from Chinese practitioners, and he went to remission from MS. Symptoms disappeared after that. He was awed by the power of acupuncture, so he became one himself, an acupuncturist. I was a very reductive, Western cause and effect, scientific type thinker. No such thing as faith. What do you mean God? What do you mean faith? Where? How? What are you talking about? Show me. And that was the first moment that I really got a glimpse at age 21, I guess, beyond the veil. He taught me how to do transcendental meditation. And I remember driving home from his place past a graveyard, past a cemetery, and having the experience of connecting to all those old souls that are there. Kind of communion I never would have expected to have otherwise. I was very three-dimensional, 3D reality to sort of matrix denizen until then. So that was a gateway. But that's just in 3D. Because what had been percolating since before I was a baby and since many past lifetimes was the Dharma I'm in right now, which you sort of touched on a little bit, and I think you and I might share some of that. But that was, the practice-oriented underpinnings of it. Learning meditation is very, very important. Finding that still center point outside of the distractions and abstractions of the ones and zeros that continue to sort of filter down in front of our eyes, make us believe this is a tangible reality.
I actually just had a little image of the Matrix film when you said that about how we perceive and how we project, and even our perceptions of what reality is.
Yeah. But for me, to be quite candid, and some people might look at this as a little kooky, I've been informed by a group who calls themselves the Space Brothers. The Space Brothers is a collective that other people might refer to as the Arcturians or the aliens, but it's really a higher order of our own consciousness. It's just my deepest sense of consciousness that's not really accessible from the conscious mind. They've been my guides from the very beginning. Waking up in the middle of the night with a dark figure at the foot of the bed. People have this experience. Shadow people. That's what I had. And it was terrifying. I mean, you wake up screaming several times a week for most of my life. I mean, it was really quite a harrowing education. And I realized later on through contact with these sort of beings that what was actually happening is it was an initiation into a higher frequency of understanding. They were giving me a Shakti pot, the descent of grace from the divine. And I didn't know it at the time, because Shakti, the Holy Spirit, going in feels like battery acid. When it comes out, it's grace. This much battery acid creates that much grace. This much love compacted creates evil, fear, anger, violence. So it's just degrees of compaction. So that's what I've been going through, and that's been my 3D curriculum and then my 5D curriculum, if I can put it that way. But it's been a long process.
And I will say, I want to hear more about your story, and not to interrupt, but of course, we're finding out right now about things like quantum physics and our understanding of the universe, and how everything is based on sound and light and frequency and vibration. So it's really not, I mean, maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, it could seem a little bit out of the box, but I think more and more, especially now with the emergence of so much disclosure that's happening around the world with various governments, and the validation that there are other galactic civilizations that do exist. We're not the only sentient beings in the entire galaxy and universe. So I just wanted to say that, but again, it's a fascinating. So let's continue down the path here of your story, and this is fascinating. Thank you.
I like what you said about sound and light. Sound is precedent to light, correct? In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." Sound is the substratum. It's the layer on which everything else is built. It is the substance from which everything else is built. And I've had this in the mystical experience, in the visionary state, in the dream state, in my scientific excursions. I've understood that through so many different realms of reality, that sound is precedent. And out of that comes light. Out of that comes motion and movement in life. If you can touch the deepness of meditation and that seed syllable of Om or no sound, you're accessing the fundamental building block of that sound from which everything can spring. That's the Akashic record. We can yank any old thing down from. That's what AI is doing right now. Hey, ChatGPT, I'm going to give you the annual reports and beige book from the last 50 years of Fortune 500 companies. Who are the top 3 highest performing CFOs? Oh, I'm glad you asked me that, David. It'll give that to me instantaneously. I'll say, hey, ChatGPT, give me William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying in the style of Terence McKenna. Starts instantaneously from the first word of chapter 1. How is that? I know this doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation about AI, but this is where our consciousness is evolving and developing right now. And it's the fruition of my dharma. Because what the Space Brothers told me in a moment of absolute abject despair and suicidal blackness, one of many in my life, they came to me and said, oh, you must be forgetting what your mission was. Do you want us to remind you what your mission was? Did I tell you about this before?
You started to mention about it, but I will say, go down any rabbit hole that seems appropriate. I think it's fascinating about AI right now because you and I talked about a book I'm working on, and I've had it written and all the IP stuff done for years and years, and now it's to try to find an artist to render 25 illustrations and plates is a daunting and huge economic task. But literally in real time right now, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, through a friend of mine, through AI, we're rendering all of these characters. It's actually fascinating to see them come into life, from the visionary, etheric, astral dimensions, actually into the physical 3D. So very, very, it's a fascinating time, which is part of this whole kind of new design, new paradigm energy.
AI is a blessing and a curse. It's a tool that needs to be used consciously and patiently. And anybody who's a doomsayer that says, the robots are going to kill us and take us over, I don't know if I have a stake in that argument. I think it's all myself. I think I am all beings and all things. The human is everything. There's only a few degrees of differentiation in our genetic code between chimpanzees and trees and rocks. We're all the same thing. It's one organism. It's one being fighting its way through evolution and conspiring with itself to grow and evolve. And any negative input is really just fuel to that fire. In fact, the older I get, if I develop any wisdom at all, it is in the darkness is the light. Bring the light into the darkness, light into the darkness. No, there's no room there. It's already brighter than bright. You find somebody who's tortured, traumatized prisoner, in a cell somewhere, thinking, boy, that guy is just far gone. There's no way to access him. He is actually the one who's this close to transcendence. He's gunpowder, just a little bit of a spark. Is ready to set off the conflagration. Whereas so many other people are so embedded in this world of, I gotta be a good automaton, that they're the ones that aren't accessible. The good law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, as Robert Kiyosaki says, that's what society programs us to do. Go to school so you can get a well-paying job, so that you can buy a house, pay off your debt, invest in the stock market. That's what that society wants you to do. But that is just, golden handcuffs. There's freedom so much further beyond that. There's no moment in the history of the world in which there's so many tools at your disposal to be a liberated, free, autonomous engine of your own creative life and your own financial life. That's what I want to help people do, if I can help them do anything. But they're on their own curriculum. It's matriculating along just fine without my interference or help. Thank you very much. That's what I've learned too. But if I'm in the moment, God asks me to say something, do something to help, that's fine. I'll do that. But I'm not what you call a do-gooder. I don't go, getting a petition going and having people sign it and take it to the congressperson to get some law passed so that X, Y, and Z can happen. Good, more power to people who want to do that. That's cool. That's not my bag. Because we talked about this before. Everything starts in my own heart. This is where this whole world, this conversation here, my house, the place I live, this was all born in my own heart and my own ideation. This is where it lives. This is where the whole universe lives. So if I want to affect any change in the universe, bring some sense of harmony, beauty, life, durability to this condition, I can just do a little quarter turn here. That's all it takes in my own meditative practice, in my own spiritual life, my own dealings with other people. Once that goes out into the universe, those radial spokes that go all the way out into the deep universe, millions of light years, the farther you get from here, the wider that bandwidth becomes, and the more challenging it is to knit something together or fix something in a condition way out there. And that means the end of my street, the end of my county and state and country. Farther I get out into that, the more difficult it is to forge anything usable, useful, or changeful. I can do all that work in a trice right here, right in the comfort of my own home or office environment or living room, anywhere I want to be, driving in the car. Here it is.
Wow. It sounds like you're alluding to radical self-responsibility.
Self with a capital S. There are no
Yes.
others. There are no
Well,
others.
it's interesting. I want to continue to go on to this thread here, but when you were talking, I was thinking about, in the past, we're both different, practitioners, embodiers of these various amazing teachers and spiritual paths, and some of these spiritual pearls express themselves through religious disciplines. But I was thinking about the concept of Dzogchen and that state of emptiness. Now, when you say that to a Western mind, we have to attain emptiness. They say, well, why do I want to be empty? I want to be full of peace and compassion, or I want to be full of the self, or I want to, and as the Kempo was saying the other day at Vajravidya, and you were saying it, nirvana and samsara exists within us. It's up to us of what we discern and what we germinate and cultivate. But it's fascinating because as you're saying this, and you were talking about the Shakti, when we become empty, kind of like a bamboo reed, which can be a flute, when that wind of spirit of the divine comes through us and moves us, that has profound not only effect on ourselves and our own individual evolution, but also it can have profound effect, let's say, or influence on our surroundings environment. And as you said, again, we go out, it starts to potentially dissipate, but nonetheless, that's a powerful way of being.
For most people, that flute is a sausage casing stuffed with raw sausage. Trying to play the flute.
You're a poet too.
Nothing can get through there because it's too full. They're too full of their own ideas. They're too full of their own ego. They're too full of. I'm not excluding myself from that. I've got ideas. I've got an ego. That's fine. I'm not pointing my finger. If I'm pointing anywhere, it's like here, But that flute, as you elegantly put, needs to be blown out and emptied to be able to make space for that divine wind to come through it. And I think that's what a great teacher does in part. And maybe that's what your Dzogchen teacher was able to do for that, those sitting there that day, is to empty that. Not by pointing to, page 43, memorize this and go practice it, but by the pure transmission of grace from the beingness that flushes out that stuckness. That's the white light coming in. Anybody who has cancer, anybody who has any stuck disease, resentments, meet someone like Jesus, meet someone like Nisargadatta, and they will precipitate the flushing out of that, that stuckness, and replace it with a pure white, radiant, divine light, which is the composite of all things and all beings and all opportunities and perfection. That's a possibility for us. We're in the West, we're really reluctant to even accept that idea. Oh, there's no such thing as perfection. There's always working toward this or that. Can always be better. No, I don't subscribe to that. I don't think it can always be better. I think this moment is perfect and pristine and needs to be understood as such. And that means I don't care how hectic it gets and how problematic and how full of obstructions and challenges and heat and pressure that moment can be. That's a perfect moment. That's your perfect teacher. And there's stuff happening on a cosmic level and on a somatic level, even in the heat and pressure, perhaps especially there. It is galvanizing change that we don't even see on the gross level. So accepting that, understanding that, having the wisdom to go, oh, this moment is perfect. I'm grateful for this moment. And I tell my clients, sure, I deal with publishing, as I say, but really, as much as anything, I'm a spiritual holding space. That's what I'm doing. And I'll say there's 3 times in the day that I would urge anyone to practice gratitude. And that is right before you go to bed, right when you wake up in the morning, and every minute in between. If you can do that, not just gratitude. Oh, I've got a roof over my head. Thank you for this beautiful meal. I appreciate my family and friends. I'm grateful for these things. Well, what about the suffering? What about the times where you were just on your face on the ground, lying in misery because of what your ego had tortured you into in this life? What about those times? Shouldn't you be grateful for that? That's what really forged you. Speaking for myself, without that suffering, you don't get better. Without that suffering, that you don't get tempered and evolved. It's like playing tennis against somebody who doesn't know how to play tennis. You don't want to do that. Go play against the Saturday duffer. Yeah, it's easy. You can have an easy life. Fine. Person just dinks it back to you every single time. You get a nice forehand down the line and they just bonk, clunk it back to you. You need somebody who really hits hard and is good and puts you in uncomfortable positions and makes you chase it and makes you sweat and makes you heave. Those are the allies that we call them our enemies, our nemesis, the ones that are really punishing us. Those are the ones we really should be thankful for, because they're the ones that are actually showing us the pathway to evolution and to grace. It's not just about having an easy life. It's about being grateful for the entire tissue of this reality, all of it. And if I can do that, if I can share that presence with anybody else.
Well, I will say, even speaking what you're saying right now and the perspective that you have is inspiring and exhilarating. And I wouldn't say it comes from a sheeple type consciousness. But when you talk about these people like the tennis match, you've had some really unique experiences. I believe in India, and you've had beings that have really influenced you and experiences. I know you talked about a pilgrimage you did on your knees. Can you share a little bit about that? Because again, these are fascinating stories, like you said, that sometimes we have to be down on our knees and dragging ourselves through the gravel to actually get to those pinnacles and those kind of zeitgeist moments of our evolution.
2 years ago, I went to Tiruvannamalai. It's a little hamlet in South India and the birthplace of the ashram of Ramana Maharshi. Are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just listening. I'm just moving for a minute.
Yeah, I think we're still going. And thanks for asking about that experience, because it was one of the most profound of my life. Being in India in general is just an absolute madhouse. Cars and traffic and Vespas and motorcycles going in every which way, every possible vector, beeping, honking, noise, pollution, rubble, decay, and dirt everywhere you look. And in Tiru in particular, this is a highly evolved spiritual place that's home to some of the great sadhus, saints and sages of the world who populate and live in this place and have for centuries or maybe even millennia. And I was on pilgrimage to go there to visit the ashram of Ramana Maharshi, who died in 1950. But he has a legacy left behind of many living teachers, including Gangama, who's my living teacher that lives there. And there's too many stories to tell about the beauty of what I experienced there. But toward the end, I made the pilgrimage around Arunachala mountain. This is a mountain of fable and lore, said to be the body of Shiva. In other words, this is the body of God in the form of this giant hill. Looks like a huge ant pile, just kind of a perfect hill. The circumference around that is 8 miles or 15 kilometers. And pilgrims from all over the world go there to walk around that barefoot to receive the blessing of the mountain. And that's what I resolved to do. I had already gotten in a motorcycle accident, very close to death, got amnesia, woke up not knowing who I was or where I was, got a giant contusion on my side, and experienced a number of sort of really harrowing, straightening circumstances like that. But I had really resolved toward the end of my journey, this is mid-COVID, to walk around this mountain. And you remember in The Wizard of Oz, they talked about the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. This happens to have be made of yellow brick, the entire circumference of this whole thing. The curve is made of yellow brick. And so I found myself on the yellow brick road to some kind of imagined paradise. But going through it was so hard. You're supposed to do it barefoot. So you're talking about 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Even at the end of the day, the asphalt's still sizzling. You're walking on bare feet. And going through all sorts of trials and tribulations just along that 8-mile walk. It should take about 3.5 hours. It took me 8 hours. So starting out about 8 at night, when the sun was setting a little bit and the pavement was starting to cool, and ending up deep into the next morning. By the end, I'm walking along broken glass and spittle and cow dung and assorted mystery fluids and jagged pavements. And I finally get there toward the end. I'm literally walking one step at a time, sitting down, walking another step, crawling past death's door. I really could have died there. That's what it felt like. I felt like I did die in some way. But in the following days, once I finally made it through that, I just had this amazing blessing wash over me. The divine Shakti was so rich, so full, and so pronounced. The sense of completion, the sense of perfect understanding, the sense of total humility. And I don't mean humility as a spiritual value. Aren't I so humble? Look at me. Humility is a state. Broke down humility. I was humble. To be in that spot and to have that mountain look down on the higher beings and say, how does that feel? Remember that feeling. Feel that, because that's what a lot of your brothers and sisters are feeling right now. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever get higher than that. Because in order to dwell in the low places where there's torture and torment, trauma and hurt, and help the people that are experiencing that right now, give a glimpse of salvation, a glimpse of freedom, a glimpse of something beyond that, even if it's for a second, a minute, a day. In order to do that, you need to know what they're going through and what they've been through. And you need to feel that as yourself and know them as yourself. And so that was the profound culmination of an extraordinary journey to India. And I'm not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people that go to holy places like that and are treated to a glimpse beyond this veil, and they're able to bring it back into their workaday life. And that's my hope.
Wow. Amazing story. So as we get towards the conclusion of our time together, because I know you and I could talk for hours and multiple incarnations, downloading the Akashic records into the morphogenic field. And but going back to kind of this concept of regenesis, of rebirthing, of recreating, of midwifing something new, whether it's a new earth through what's happening right now with the geomagnetic plates moving, or the ionosphere, or climate change or whatever's happening with humanity on a spiritual level, there is, whether through divine grace and a bigger picture or plan than any one of us can see through our own, myopic perspectives. But there is a lot of transformation and purification that's happening. What would be your thoughts for people who are watching this video? Maybe another pearl of some truth that could help them, assisting them in their recreation and their rebirthing of something new as the old falls away.
No help, no assistance, no advice. Just follow your heart. You're in it. It's happening. It's on autopilot. I don't care what you do now. The conflagration is burning. You can throw any old thing into it, and it becomes fuel. Stick with it. Stay awake. It's happening. So I don't need to help anybody. I don't need to instruct anybody. I don't need to give them any advice or anything, because they're just in it. And it's automatic. There's an automaticity to this process, in my experience. It's quite beautiful. And the conveyor belt is moving. And ain't nothing we can do to stop it.
Beautifully said. As an interfaith minister, studying different religious disciplines for a couple of years, and then actually living in those communities, and then looking at things like metaphysics and Freud and Jung and existentialism and all of these things, metaphysics. There's a certain beauty about, it's like the analogy of the rock in the river. It has all these jagged edges and it's making all these waves and going through this. But eventually, at some point, that it just, through nature's intelligence, it just becomes aligned, it becomes smooth, it becomes harmonious, and doesn't have to cut and be so jagged and experience so much of that turbulence that many of us have in our lives as we move towards allowing ourselves to become that smooth rock in that flowing stream of consciousness. So if people would like to know more about your publishing work, is that something that's publicly available? People can contact you, because of course a lot of people have these pearls of knowledge or truth or stories that they want to share, and you're providing an incredible platform for that to happen. Is that possible? And can you share some information on that?
Thanks. Yeah. They can go to two places, steamenginepublishing.com. And they can also go for the publishing side. They can go to davidthomasscott.com for the spiritual side. So there's the 3D and the 5D for you. You can go pick which one, which tree to bark up.
All right. Well, it's been really inspiring to have this time together. It's always great to know we're living in the same community here and at the foot of these incredible, majestic mountains, the Sangre de Cristo. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and what you bring and resonate and vibrate into the world. And we really appreciate you and having this time together on Regenesis.
Thanks for everything you do too, Michael. You're a dynamo. You're a very powerful being. You're an important center. We are all things and all beings, but there's still centers in this infinity, and you're one of them. And this show is one of them, and Regenesis is one. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'll accept that. It feels good in a humble way, because I'm really here because of the amazing influencers that I've had in my life, the medicine people, the saints, people like Baba Haridas, and the sages and the mystics. And of course, we have to show up at the doorstep to be able to get that Shakti, like you were saying, to get the taste of that Amrita, which once we have that and we get inspired, it's like, I want more. Because, sometimes it can get easy just to fall back into what's easy and, comfortable and warm and fuzzy. But like you said, sometimes we just have to get down and crawl on our knees around that mountain and make that sacred journey. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, man. It's great to see you today.
Absolutely. You too. So I want to thank everyone for tuning into, actually, we're kind of getting Regenesis back on its feet, but I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is a project of Golden Road TV, bridging the past with today for a better tomorrow, and our new endeavor, Earthstock Foundation, our nonprofit, which is looking at the importance of how we can kind of take stock in people and the planet and having a positive future as we move through Kali Yuga towards Satya Yuga, a golden age of embodying our highest ideals. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back again soon.